As much as we all dread the day that a hugely compelling TV character meets their maker, often it ends up that they basically brought it upon themselves. Whether heroes, villains, or somewhere in between, these 10 characters all earmarked their own deaths, episodes, or even entire seasons in advance through their short-sighted and often straight-up idiotic behaviour. From characters setting themselves up for a heroic sacrifice to protagonists who took things one step too far, and villains whose actions were simply too heinous for them to keep living. They were all doomed from a very specific moment in time. As soon as these scenes played out, it was clear where things were going, and true to form, sometime later each character had their ticket punched. In some cases they were lent the swift mercy of a gunshot to the head, but in others, they weren't quite so lucky. Whether deliciously deserved or heartbreakingly not, it was crystal clear that these TV deaths were on the horizon. I am Kirsten from What Culture, and these are 10 exact moments that we knew TV characters were doomed to die. Number 10. Ramsay feeds his baby brother to his dogs. Game of Thrones. It says a lot about Game of Thrones' Ramsay Bolton that neither him raping Sansa Stark nor castrating Theon Greyjoy were quite the worst thing he ever done. In fact, Ramsay's most vile act, and the one which conclusively clued viewers to his fate, was in the early season 6 episode Home, where he lures his stepmother Walder and his newborn baby stepbrother into a kennel where they're feasted upon by his ravenous dogs. Though many had anticipated a climactic showdown between Ramsay and Jon Snow, this was the tipping point where it became obvious that Ramsay would definitely be getting his grisly comeuppance. Murdering a baby is pretty much the last major storytelling taboo, and while Ramsay absolutely could have gotten away with his various hideous transgressions against adults, this was so cartoonishly evil as to immediately seal his fate. And so, in the season's penultimate episode, Battle of the Bastards, Ramsay is defeated by Jon and eaten alive by his own hounds while Sansa watches. Satisfying isn't even the word. Number 9. Bob volunteers to reset the breakers. Stranger Things. Bob Newby was introduced in Stranger Things' second season as Joyce Byers' new partner, a well-meaning if ultimately rather boring person who struggles to connect with Joyce's sons. But in a textbook example of a nothing character being redeemed at the 11th hour, Bob steps up and demonstrates his sure heroism in the second season's penultimate episode, Chapter 8, The Mind Flayer. When Bob, Joyce, Hopper, Owens and Mike end up trapped inside the Hawkins lab after a power cut, Bob volunteers to head to the basement and reset the breakers. And at that moment, we all knew that Bob wasn't leaving the lab alive, because no redemptive heroic deed goes unpunished. Within minutes of volunteering himself and successfully resetting the breakers, Bob gets brutally mauled to death by a pack of demo dogs as he flees the lab, cementing him as an unexpected tragic hero. Number 8. Stringer tells Avon he killed D'Angelo. The Wire. As ruthlessly intelligent and ambitious as Stringer Bell was shown to be throughout his run on The Wire, he really has only himself to blame for his death. In Season 3's Moral Midgetry, Stringer makes the colossal mistake of telling his drug kingpin boss Avon Barksdale that he was the one who ordered the murder of his nephew D'Angelo. The already strained relationship between Stringer and Avon is irreparably damaged from this point, and before Stringer can complete his plot to send Avon back to prison, Stringer gets caught short a few episodes later when he's shot dead by Omar and brother Muzone, by order of Avon. Despite Stringer being arguably the smartest character in the series, his Machiavellian scheming ultimately got the better of him, and we knew his number was up from the moment he confessed to taking D'Angelo off the chessboard. Number 7. Walter poisons Brock. Breaking Bad. Walter White committed a number of heinous transgressions throughout Breaking Bad, and honestly, letting Jesse's girlfriend Jane choke to death on her own vomit was probably enough to write him off entirely. But there's an even worse act which truly tipped the balance too far, one repulsive enough that many fans simply gave up rooting for Walt and simply watched to see him play out the clock. That moment, of course, was poisoning Brock, the innocent young son of Jesse's girlfriend Andrea, at the end of Season 4 End Times. Walt uses poisonous berries from the plant Lily of the Valley to make Brock fall ill, and in turn manipulate Jesse into believing that Gus was responsible. Brock thankfully recovers from being poisoned, but it was just a step too far villainous for audiences to try and excuse Walt any longer. There was no coming back for Walt after this, serving as proof perfect that he cared more about the game than innocent lives. He had to go. And so, in the season finale, Walt dies of gunshot wounds after rescuing Jesse from Jack. Heroic? Sure. Redemptive? Somewhat. But it doesn't erase the fact that Walt almost got a child killed. Number 6. Andrea sleeps with the governor. The Walking Dead. A surefire way to get you on the chopping block in any TV show is to sleep with the enemy. And that's exactly what The Walking Dead's Andrea did in the show's 3rd season. Soon after being brought to Woodbury, Andrea grows close to the town's tyrannical leader known as the Governor. And midway through the season, she ends up having sex with him. This pretty much cemented that Andrea was beyond redemption, and as any horror movie fan knows, questionable sexual encounters are a surefire indicator that your time is running out. Though Andrea eventually appreciates the full extent of the governor's savagery, it all comes too late, as in the season finale, Welcome to the Tombs, she gets bitten while imprisoned by the governor and promptly ends up shooting herself. Number 5. Shane kills Lem. The Shield. One of the most shocking TV moments of the last 20 years was the sudden death of Detective Curtis Lem Lemansky in the Shield's season 5 finale. Manipulated into believing that Lem was going to implicate the rest of the strike team in their money train heist, a desperate Shane covertly meets up with Lem and drops a grenade in his lap, killing him. This was the moment where fans knew that ever dubious Shane had gone too far, and that when Vic eventually found out, there was going to be hell to pay. But as it turns out, Vic never gets to avenge Lem's death, as in the series finale episode Family Meeting, a cornered Shane shoots himself in the head, but not before also killing his wife and young son in a murder-suicide. We all knew Shane's fate was sealed the moment he killed Lem, but just about nobody expected him to implode quite so decisively. Number 4. Lane steals from the company. Mad Men. The eventual demise of Sterling Cooper's financial officer, Lane Price, may have been heartbreaking, but it wasn't exactly surprising, given that so much of Lane's time on the show was defined by various unfortunate incidents involving both his family and his finances. But things didn't take a truly concerning turn until near the end of season 5, when a cash-strapped Lane decided to embezzle $7,500 from Sterling Cooper Draper Price by forging Don's signature on a check. We all knew it wouldn't end well for Lane, and while a firing was certainly on the cards, his increased fragility made it pretty clear he was probably in for worse. And so 2 episodes later, Lane is duly fired by Don when his theft is discovered, after which he promptly commits suicide by hanging himself in his office. Grim. Number 3. Schillinger has Beecher's son killed. Oz. Oz's Vern Schillinger, played by J.K. Simmons, is one of the most detestable characters in the history of TV. A relentlessly hateful rapist, murderer, and white supremacist who nearly immediately makes new inmate Tobias Beecher his mortal enemy. Schillinger was guilty of so many reprehensible acts throughout his 6 seasons on the show, but nothing worse than in the series' 4th season, where he has Beecher's young son and daughter kidnapped. Though Beecher's daughter is eventually returned safely, things don't quite go so well for his son Gary. Vern has the poor boy's hand cut off and mailed to Beecher in Oz before ordering his murder outright. And with that, there was just no chance that Schillinger was going to survive to see the end of the series, though in fairness, he very nearly did. In the series finale, Beecher stabs Schillinger to death during a prison rendition of the play Macbeth. And because the authorities couldn't prove that Beecher switched the prop knife with a real one, Schillinger's death is ultimately ruled an accident. Number 2. Chris's daughter's baptism. The Sopranos. Christopher Moltisanti is one of The Sopranos' most fascinating characters, the hot-headed protege of Tony Soprano, whose increasingly volatile behaviour ends up condemning him to death. Near the end of the series run, Chris becomes increasingly despondent with the mobster life and seeks to branch out into film production with a mob-themed slasher movie called Cleaver. In the masterful season 6 episode Stage 5, Cleaver is finally premiered, and Tony comes to realise that the film is a thinly veiled revenge fantasy in which a Tony-esque character is violently murdered. At the end of the episode, Tony attends the baptism of Chris's daughter, and a prolonged, tense exchange unfolds where Tony knowingly embraces Chris, making it clear to viewers that Chris's days are numbered. 4 episodes later in Kennedy and Heidi, fate catches up with Chris, and after crashing his car while driving high, Tony, who was a passenger in the car, decides to suffocate him to death. It's one of the series' most shocking moments and undeniably set Tony on the path towards his ambiguous yet surely torrid final fate. But on the other hand, it's clear that Chris was a ticking time bomb set to annihilate not only himself but also his family, indicated by the haunting, lingering image of the baby seat destroyed by his car accident. Number 1. Sue Shelby buys a sports car. Ozark. Ozark's third season introduced Sue Shelby, the Birds' therapist who ends up accepting bribes from both Marty and his wife Wendy to sway the tide of the therapy sessions in their respective favours. They eventually discover that Sue has been playing them against one another for her own gain, but that's not all. She ultimately extorts them for more money in order to keep her mouth shut about their criminal behaviours. But Sue unequivocally ensures that she won't be making it out of Dodge alive, when late in the season she rocks up to the birdhouse in a snazzy new sports car. Later in the same episode, she expresses to cartel lawyer Helen Pierce an intent to shake the Birds down for even more money, and no more than a few minutes later, Helen has her enforcer Nelson shoot Sue in the head. I mean, let's face it, she had it coming. And that's our list. What do you think of these doomed characters? Were their deaths deserved? Leave us a comment down below and let us know. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't already, click that subscribe button. But for now, I have been Kirsten from What Culture, and I will see you in the next video.